first off, if somebody's like launching, like just to take a step back, my thesis is that there is actually an importance to visual brand. So the visual brand, it should be cohesive, right? So somebody goes from an ad to a landing page to a website. We want the messaging to be cohesive. We want the visuals to be cohesive. Now, create visuals that can be to that platform, right? But there should be some cohesive themes throughout. I say that because if we are like going to market with a new brand, I first actually look at the website. Like, where are we sending people to the website? Because we need to have product photos, product videos, things of that nature, right? So the first month, let's say, we're going to be planning out the creative strategy. So like, what are the initial themes that we're going to test on the ads? Hopefully there was some sort of like reason why they bought this or reason why they made this product, right? So like, what makes them unique? Let's probably dig into that, right? And create a bunch of different ad formats that we want to like go and test. We'll do one shoot. You'll get photos, you'll get videos, you'll have some actors, and you'll run through the scripts and all that stuff. What's great about photos, you can use those on the product page. You can also start to build out a ton of different statics off of that imagery that you have, right? And I'll get to why that's really important a little bit later. Then you have like your product videos and stuff like that. Very simple, just some simple stuff. Like overview of what the product is and kind of like core themes, and that can be your product page. Then you actually build out those ads. Those ads launch and you get data back. And I think we'll obviously talk about like what data we're looking for and things like that. But just again, to go through the timeline, you're getting data back.
Just to be hyper specific, what you said is in that phase one, you are producing, I would love to even put a number on it, like
Sure.
various amounts of creative angles and styles and different things, because you don't know what's going to work. You're taking some big swings. Maybe you're taking some low risk swings as well in there. You know, how much are you, what's the amount of variance that you're producing for in that phase one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. Everything always comes down to budget, right? So like where the brand is in terms of like spend, because like if you think about it, you can make a ton of assets, but if you don't have enough ad spend, like where you can get some statistical significance back, then you're kind of like doing yourself a disservice. To me, what I think is you got to start. I personally am in the camp of starting smaller and having more focus on a few items. Like at the bare minimum, do 3 very different angles, right? Like 3 very different angles. Focus on having a variation of like the hooks or some sort of element in that angle. So let's say you do 2 to 3 hooks, but at the same angle, right? So you have 9 videos. So 3 times 3 is 9. Right? Like just start there, right? Because if you start to do too many different things at the beginning, it's like there's a lot going on. Like you're really just trying to figure out what's your core messaging, right? Like you will figure out over time the visuals and how that all comes together in optimization, but you really just need to know like what's the one thing or a few things that if we say this, we get sales. Like that's what we need to find that correlation of. And it's kind of hard to figure that out right away. So I would say start small so you don't blow through budget. And then you can, again, take that long-term view of your content creation as well as your spend. So that's like month 1, right? Let's say you toss out 9 videos and let's say like 5 graphics, whatever. What's great about graphics, the power of graphics, is that you can actually be testing a ton of headlines at low cost. Why is this important? Because you could be testing out angles and hooks and all that stuff very quickly at a low cost. So instead of you having to be like, is this video going to work? You can actually get some data back and say, well, this headline really worked. And what was being said in this static really worked. Therefore, if we made a video version of this, then maybe that video has a better chance of working. And we actually can like start to flesh out a static into a longer form piece of content. And that's what we would look to do in month like 2 and 3 is how are we testing lots of different angles and scripts and hooks and headlines all through statics, as well as kind of perfecting or iterating off of the videos that we already have. Then as budgets scale and things are going well, then yeah, you can start to populate net new ads and net new angles. I think it's really comes down to having a really tight connection with the media buyer, the creative team, and like the marketing manager or growth manager. Like everybody has to be on the same page. Everybody's incentives have to be on the same page, right? So like that's another big thing, is like making sure people's incentives are on the same page, right? Like you don't want to just scale to scale because people get paid more or less, right? You want to make sure, are we scaling the right ads? Are we producing the right ads? And I think having those conversations, especially early on, will really help. Then, from month 3 to 6, you have now tested a lot of different angles. You've tested a lot of different variations. You've tested statics. Hopefully through that, you can start to say with some confidence, when we say X, Y, and Z, we see a result, right? And like you might start to say, like figure out like, hey, this offer, when we say this offer, this is when it works. And then start to be like, okay, cool. Now we're going to try and say this one thing, the same thing, 5 different ways. And then you start to get really into the nitty gritty of optimization, because you've already found product market fit, message fit, market fit, whatever I don't know what you want to call that, but all the fits, right? Like once you start to get like okay, we've kind of got this. Now, how do we say this like many different times? That's the hardest thing actually, because as a creative, you want to do something new and different, but you gotta like stick to like what's working and just keep going again and again.
That's actually where I think a lot of the art form comes into play, because once you give creative people constraints, then they can go deep within those constraints and be creative. There's obviously like a proclivity as a creative to want to go blue sky and just do whatever comes to your head. But, at the end of the day, it's a business, there's data that we need to rely on. And so I think a lot of our creative people on our team actually yearn for those constraints. It's like, I want to do something that I know is going to have measurable impact. So you need to, the marketing manager, the campaign lead, like they need to provide me as a creative with a hypothesis and like explain it to me like I'm 5 years old. What are you trying to improve within this campaign? Are you trying to your point, see if this hook works better to increase thumb stop rate? Are we trying to look for higher ROAS to see if the ad actually is good at selling the product and convincing people to actually buy the product? It's not just engaging. Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old, and then I can go really deep and be really creative. But there is a time and place for big swings even further down as you get to phase 3, 4, 5, whatever, 6 months, 9, 12 months, even beyond that. And so what is your perspective on, let's say you're working with a brand for 12 months or more, and you've gone through multiple cycles and you're getting really granular and you're running all these tests. When do you feel, or what are the subjective sort of factors that come into like kind of a confluence where you're like, you know what, I think it's time that we try something at a left field and we go big and see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to my like, again, kind of like, I don't know if it's a core thesis, but I just feel like you need to be original. You got to stand out, and you're not going to stand out by constantly iterating off of frame by frame, like going one frame at a time. It's necessary. So don't get me wrong. Like you need to have that scientific approach to content. But what I think is really funny is that we act as if consumers are rational. We are not rational, right? Again, 95% of human thought is subconscious. So if somebody is telling you why they bought something, I'm not saying that it's untrue, but I'm saying that there's actually other factors that go and play into that. They just don't know how to, they can't even articulate that, right? And so what's funny is that we look at P&Ls, which is very logical. It's a very rational thing. P&L, you've got money in, you got money coming out. You look at data, it's a very rational thing. But you have to remember, consumers are not rational. So we are making decisions as if they are rational, as if they are looking at the data, as if they are data and things like that. But you have to then over time figure out, okay, these are working, but what's going to be that anomaly that we're going to create? What's going to be that thing that's going to break the rules? Because anytime any successful company has broken the rules, no successful company did the same playbook. They always had something and they tweaked it. They did something a little bit different. Our goal when we work with clients is to figure out, okay, what's the 80-20, right? Well, we'll do the stuff that we know is going to work, that's going to like get you that consistent growth. But then we want to find what's that moment that we can decide and say, you know what, we're going to do something that's really crazy. We don't know if it's going to work, but if it works, it's going to be awesome. If it doesn't, then okay, we'll just get back to the playing board, right? Like, but you gotta take those bets. And I think you gotta remember that people are rational. So you also have to spice things up in an ad account, in a campaign. And I think, you know, it really, again, always depends on growth and you know, size of company and who can take those bets. So if you're a smaller company, maybe a more original bet is going to be a bit smaller, and that's okay. But you got to like test the waters, because if you're not pushing the boundaries, you don't know what you're missing. You don't know like that new cohort of customers that could be flooding in who's craving your product, because you're just trying to do the same thing over and over again. And so I think you just got to go for some of those irrational bets, because humans are irrational too.
Yeah, it's like I liken it to developing product. You know, you have to, there's like these two forces that are always working in parallel. You have the incremental, you know, month over month, quarter over quarter updates that keep you chugging along and making sure you're hitting numbers and listening to customers. And then you've got the innovation cycles, and you need to have either people or a culture that fosters those big swings that are actually what ultimately move the needle in the sense of bring you to a new threshold. And so you definitely need both. I love your approach because it's exactly how we approach it. So I'm a little bit biased. We call this the campaign flywheel. And we've identified 6 major kind of milestones or checkpoints within this flywheel that within a campaign, you never get off the flywheel. It just goes around and around and around. And so you've got the campaign strategy, you've got research and ideation, you then have defining your tests and briefing the creative, and then you have creator enablement, post-production, and data analysis. And you just go around that circle. And what it does is it helps to make sure each person that's on the team is really tethered to one another, and they're being as thorough with their context when they're handing off to the next kind of like checkpoint as possible, because that's where you can get a lot of information and efficiency loss when people just expect that the other person on the team knows exactly what's in their head or knows what the goals are or knows what the hypothesis is. And that's like a huge blind spot. So, you know, that's totally how we train our teams. And I think the thing that we're trying to figure out, which is that art form, is like when to introduce those big swings, those innovations to the creative, if you will. And I think that does really need to come from, you know, the campaign leader who's like, okay, we have this amount of budget. I can hedge my bet in this way to make sure we're doing the things that we are very confident of and we have a high kind of confidence score of. And then, you know, we can allocate some of this budget. And if we burn this entire portion of the budget, it won't be the end of the world.